What is up, everybody? I'm Timmy Foodie. Welcome back to the show. Hit me up on Instagram at Timmy_foodie or head over to timmyfoodie.com for more great recipes. Today we are going to do, it's a simple one, just beans on toast. Now you might think, oh, anyone can cook beans on toast, and they can, of course. But what I'm trying to do is not make this beep. Get this on. What I'm trying to do is, let's turn that off while it's not making any noise. Just show you a way to maybe jazz this up a little bit. Because it can be a pretty deliciously awesome meal if you do a few little tips and tricks that I'm going to show you now. So what we need is pretty simple. We have got just some butter. I like using Lurpak because it's delicious. With some nice sourdough bread. That's really important. It has to be sourdough. If it's not sourdough, it can be... It'll work, but not it'll work as well. There's something happens with sourdough when you kind of fry it in a pan with butter, which is what we're going to be doing, and it goes all nice and crispy edged and delicious. And then we just need some grated cheese. I've just already grated this. This is just a mixture of like a really creamy, mature cheddar and a bit of Gouda. So it's got a nice bit of melty gooiness to it, and then a nice bit of flavour from the cheddar. So that's just literally some grated cheese. Tin of beans. We're not going to do anything super fancy with the beans. I'm just going to warm them through. I will do my own baked bean recipe at some point because it is pretty delicious, but I want this to be just a super simple, quick snack that you can do without too much faff. And so the only fancy thing we're doing is the stuff to the bread. So we're going to get to that now. So get your beans on a really low heat just to gently warm through, and then we'll get onto this stage. We're going to put our pan on to a kind of medium sort of heat, and let's let that warm up first, and then we'll cut the bread and go from there. Right, so beans are on. Now we're getting to, let's just get this out of the way. This is just warming up really gently. I'm going to just turn it down a touch. So now we just want to slice some bread. I want a kind of thickish cut, so I'm going to cut it from about there initially. So this is just a Sonoma sourdough, which is pretty good over here. My favourite sourdough is from my local Harris farm, because the guys there just do this beautiful sourdough that you can get just as it's come out the oven. So I'm cutting about, what's that, 1.5 centimetres thick slice. I'm going to go 2 of those. And just get a nice, obviously, bread knife. Hang on, fuck that up. And there's our 2 lovely slices of bread. Now, the little holes in it are awesome because we're going to get all sorts of cheese gooiness through those, which is going to be ace. Pop that over here to one side. So there's our bread. So all we need now is butter, cheese, and that's kind of it for the minute. Beans are on, just doing their thing. Keep an eye on them to make sure they don't burn, but they're on a nice low heat. So I'm just trying to warm them through and not really get them bubbling away or anything. They just want to just really gently warm up. So I'm just going to check that every so often. Make sure that's okay. This is warming through nicely. And then we're just going to cut off a nice big chunk of butter. I'm going to cut that into 2 bits. Now, if this was kind of out the fridge and spreadable, you could just spread it onto your butter like this. But I've got to get it out of the fridge, so it's a bit of a faff to do that. So we can do it this way, which in most cases is probably how you're going to do it. So that's probably warm enough. So we're just going to get the butter in the pan and just kind of spread it out in a space that's about the size of this bread. And just get that melting ever so gently. Let me get a non-stick. This is great for non-stick pans, just like a kind of rubbery, nice flat spatula thing. So that's melting down nicely, and I'm just going to pop that right on top of that little knob there. Move that around a bit, pop this on here, and just get that moving around nicely. Now we don't want the heat to be too high because I don't want the butter to really burn. So this is going to take a few minutes, probably going to be about 10 minutes in all that we're doing this bread thing for. And we just want to make sure that's all nicely coated on that side, which it is. That's great. Move that around. I'm just going to bring that up 1 little notch in the heat. And this is excellent. So what I'm going to do is just let this do its thing for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll come back and I'll show you where we're at. Just keep checking on it and make sure it's going to very slowly take on some colour. Move it around and like rotate it every so often as well. If you're using your fingers, watch out, because the butter will soak through into this bread, so you're going to get really hot butter coming in through these holes, so just be careful not to burn yourself. And that's it, just let that do its thing for a couple of minutes on this side, and then we'll come back and I'll show you, well, when we flip it essentially, and I'll show you what we're kind of looking for in terms of colour on this bread. So let's give it 2 or 3 minutes and then we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. We've had about 2 minutes on this side. I'm just using like a knife here just to prop it when I flip it, so I'm not getting my fingers on it, because it's going to start getting quite hot soon, so you don't want to risk burning stuff. So can you see there, we've got, see if I can show you a little bit closer to the camera. It's just starting to get a nice bit of colour on it. That's perfect. They want to go much more than that for the minute, and you'll see like the edge bits of the bread is going really nice and golden and beautiful. I think that's a bit hot now, so I'm just going to turn that down a notch. And now what we also want to do here is just get in a couple of knobs more butter for this side. So again, just sort of get that melting through. Really nice and gentle, there we go. And then we're just going to pop that on top and pop that on top there, and just work that around a little bit, just so it's all nicely coated on that side. And then a top little tip, which you don't want to do all the time, is you do this and then you just spread some Vegemite on it, or Marmite, or whatever your favourite salty spread is, and it's absolutely awesome. But you don't want to make a habit of doing this all the time, because the whole frying bread in butter isn't the most healthy thing in the world. It is delicious though, so as a gradual little, well, it's a nice little treat to jazz up your beans on toast when you don't want to just do really simple beans on toast. This just elevates it a little bit. And it's actually a really good way to learn about heat control, because with butter you want to be really careful with it that you're not burning it. So this does teach you to keep your pan temperature controlled really nicely, and just keep an eye on it. You can't really side off anywhere when you're cooking this. You've got to really stay and watch it as you're going, because the heat is going to gradually increase in the pan anyway, so you have to keep mindful of that, and also just what's going on here. So this is starting to take on a bit of colour this side. Just going to flip that over, have a look. This side's going good, but the other side is a bit light. This side's darker, so that means I know I've got to just rotate that round, because it's obviously a bit hotter in the centre. That's kind of similar as well. So we're going to just let that tick over for a little bit more. That can do its thing. Now this side, I'll probably flip this over for a little bit longer on that side. That's looking good. That's taken on that bit of colour nicely now, as has that. You see that? That's perfect. That's where we want to be. So that kind of, if you can see that, it's perfect. So now we've got that like that. That's ready for some cheese. So we're just going to pop this, just sprinkle. You don't want to go too, I'm going to turn that down a touch now, just down to sort of a low heat, because once the cheese is on there, it's going to start caramelizing and kind of gratinating onto the bread, which is what we want, but we don't want it to go too quick and burn. So just a nice simple layer across the cheese, well, across the bread, sorry. Delicious. And you don't want to go too heavy with it. That's about right. So that's good. So now just let that warm onto it, and it'll just slightly kind of stick on the bread. You can just like push it down a little bit with your hand. It's not going to be too hot at the minute. And then we're just going to turn this really carefully, flip it over, and then that side's perfectly golden now, which is what we want. Push that down a touch, and on that one as well, just push it down a touch just to do that. And then at this point, don't move it around too much. Like, you don't want to try and flip it just yet. You want to just sort of let it do its thing. I'm down to a 2 on this induction hob now. just so you get an idea of the heat. We started at 5, when I came down to it, once I got the heat in the pan, I came down to a 4, fried off the bread at 4, and then down to a 2 on this pan. And that's doing its thing really nicely. So we're just gonna leave that doing its thing. Just gonna check on the beans, give them a stir. They're heating through really nice and gently, that's perfect. And we'll get that out of the way. I might just grab a plate out. Nice little plate. You can move that out of the way now. And this is great. So what you'll see is, in the little holes in the bread, you'll see the cheese kind of oozing and bubbling and soaking up into all those delicious little pockets and holes in the bread, which is just awesome. So now you'll see it kind of, even though this is a non-stick pan, it does feel a bit stuck to it, but that's good because we know it's doing its thing. When the cheese, because we're on a low heat, we're not too worried that it's going to burn, because it will take a while to get to that stage. What the cheese is doing is sticking up onto the bread, and then as the heat cooks it onto it, it's going to gratinate, which means take colour and go a bit, not crispy, but a little bit crispy. And once we're at that point, it should be then easy. It should just naturally free itself from the pan, and then we'll know that's the time to turn it. So I'd say at this point, once we put the cheese on and it's down, face down like this, it's probably about 2 minutes. A little bit longer. This is going to be delicious. And actually, now that's been on about a minute that side, let's grab our cheese and do the other side. And again, not too much, just a nice even coating. Yes. Look at that. And you'll get like little bits oozing out the edge, which will kind of crispen and stick out a bit, which is awesome, which is what we want. And then you'll get some crispier bits of cheese and some kind of not so crispy. Give that a little push down. Be careful now, because it's going to be a bit of heat coming through the bread, but that's cool. Once you've been cooking long enough like me, you'll have burnt yourself so many times that you'll kind of be used to it. So check the beans, they're looking good. That's just on a super low heat, just really gently heating through. You don't really need to let it simmer or bubble or anything crazy like that. So this is probably looking just really gentle, really gentle. I'm going to go for a flip and see what happens. Yes, look at that. That's awesome. So that's got a nice cheesy coating on it. It's not like overly crispy, it's just melted in and cooked off a tiny bit. We'll get the other side flipped over on this one now as well. I've got people texting me. This is New Year's Day, everyone, so I might get a few texts. Yeah, awesome. That's just doing its thing. So that can sit at that temperature. It's a bit low, but I might just knock it up one notch. It's probably not going to hurt. And can you see, you can kind of see here, the cheese is kind of gooing out, and that's great. That's going to go all crispy and actually kind of stay stuck to it. You can kind of just push that in so it kind of stays into the bread, because we don't really want to lose it. God, it's gooing massively now. That must have had a bit more Gouda in it, I reckon, than cheddar. Yeah, that's great. So that's just doing its thing. We'll just let that tick over, and then we'll be back soon. So this is just ticking along nicely now. I'm just pushing in this cheese into the edge a bit so it doesn't ooze out too far. But it will eventually cook and firm up. And go like fully gratinated. And when you get that kind of gratination on the cheese, it's super delicious, like really tasty. It just brings all this flavour out of the cheese. Yeah, that's just perfect. And this is a really good way to just do cheese on toast normally. Like normally you'll put it under the grill, but you don't actually need to. You can do it this way, and you get much more control over it as well. And then you could make this into some sort of amazing sandwich, I guess, as well. Like you could just do like a ham and cheese sandwich, toasty sort of thing, but just put some nice slices of ham and relish in this and make it into some ridiculously opulent cheesy sandwich, which would be pretty awesome. So I'm just going to actually push those in a bit, and that's looking really good. And it's still sticking a bit, so we're going to give it a little bit longer. Right, we're back. This has had about a minute more from where we were. The cheese that's oozing out has started to take on a bit of colour now, which is where we want it to be. So I'm going to try and flip one and see what happens, see if we're at a good point. Some of this is going to be a bit trial and error, and depending on the heat you're using and stuff, it's going to just be a bit varied, but yeah, that's looking really good. Look at that, that's perfect. And then this one we're going to just flip over as well. There we go. So can you see, sorry for the beeping that's going to happen, it's starting to get a bit on the edges down here and stuff like that as well, and ooze down, and that's looking about how we want it to. Let's get this on before my thing beeps at me and explodes or something. So that's great. I think this side is about perfect. It's got this nice bit of real gentle goldenness to it. It's kind of firm and a little bit crunchy to the touch, and once that hits the air, once you flipped it, it will kind of dry out a bit and get a bit crispier, which is what we want. So this also, by doing this, it gives us a nice bit of protection from the beans soaking into the bread. So the whole time when you're eating it, the bread's going to have that nice crunchiness texture to it. The worst thing about doing beans normally is the bread just sogs out and goes all horrible and gooey and not very good. So this is a really good way to kind of combat that. Plus it tastes so much better. I mean, so much better than just grating some cheese on top of your beans or something, if you like doing that thing. And this is something awesome about bread, butter, cheese and baked beans. It's just such a great combination. And like I said, it's not really something you want to be doing every day. This is maybe a little treat way to do it. Or if you're trying to impress someone. Because if you tell someone you're just making beans on toast and then you do this, they're going to be super impressed. So that's taken on a little bit more colour. Let's just flip it over one more time actually. And you've got this amazing kind of edginess to the cheese on the side of the bread as well. So that's great. Let's give that, I'm going to give that one more minute on this side and then we'll be pretty much ready to rock and roll. I'm going to pop this butter back in the fridge. And check that over, that's looking good. Let me just check on the beans one last time, make sure they're looking good. I've turned that down a bit now, even lower than it was, so that's just about perfect. They will thicken slightly as you heat them, so I'll just show you what I mean. So you can see the beans there, they've just reduced a tiny bit. They're still kind of liquidy enough because you don't want them to dry out, but they're just a bit thicker, just warm through nicely and just gently, just a little bit of steam coming off them, but that's about as hot as you want to take them. I'll just pop that back over here for a second. And this is looking pretty damn good. I think that's good. Yeah. Yeah. That is about perfect. So that's exactly what we want. I'm going to just turn that off now. Pull these out one by one. I don't know which side we'll do. I'll probably do the side that we've had face down and put that face up, because this side's dried out and gone a bit crunchy now because of being in the air. So we'll put that face down on the plate, because if you were to put the side face down that we're cooking on now, it won't have a chance to dry out and go a bit crunchy and crispy. Whereas because this other side is already, it's nicely, yeah, that's perfect. And I'm going to just do a kind of fancy layout on it because it might look better when we take the picture. That's looking pretty damn good. And this will still be hot, and all this oil we can get rid of at the end. Don't put your oil down the sink, let it dry out and use a paper towel or something and then put it in the bin, because the oil, it clogs up all the drains and stuff and you don't want that. So that's good. I'm just going to actually let that side, let these both sides dry out a touch, and just I mean, it's going to be molten hot for a while, so you don't have to worry of it cooling down too much. That's looking great. And you see this, I mean, it's all like all the edges have got no, you're lower down. You can see all the edges of the cheese. I don't know if that's going to focus, we'll see. And it's just beautiful crunchy edges to the cheese and stuff, so yeah, it's pretty damn good. Yes, very, very nice. So that's good. So we can just pop our beans on there now. So I'm going to try and find a nice edge to face it up on to make it look pretty for the photo. I think that's pretty good. And then just get your beans, turn the heat off. And I probably don't need all these beans here. I used an extra big tin. And we're just going to drizzle that on top. Oh, so good. And now if you're eating this just for you, you don't have to make it look sort of fancy like I'm trying to do, because I want to try and leave some of the cheese showing because it looks good for the photo. A little styling tip for you there. So don't overdo the quantity of stuff. Maybe just put a little dollop in the front there. Does that look nice for the picture? That's probably about right. Now, probably when I'm done with this, I probably will just dump all that on there at the end. So, because I'm a fatty, we like these things. Now I've drizzled a bit of mess there. It's not good. So if you are doing this and you're into your Instagram pictures and food stuff, then just do things like tidy up the edges if a little bit of stuff oozes around, and it just makes the picture a bit better. And yeah, there we go. There's our delicious, crunchy, cheesy bread beans on toast. It is absolutely awesome and delicious. So give that a go. Let me know what you think. Like I said, it's just meant to be a simple thing. Beans on toast doesn't get much simpler, but just doing that little thing there that I did with the bread, it just elevates it to another level. So even though it's a real basic thing, it just makes it taste super good, and I'd happily serve that to anyone. I mean, that's just super tasty. So, and no one's going to complain about that unless they don't like cheese. And then I'm not sure you can trust people who don't like cheese. So yeah, so there we go. Cheers everyone. That's my awesome cheesy beans on toast. And I hope you enjoy it. Give me a shout out if you give it a go on Instagram. You can just use the hashtag TimmyFoodie, or one word. We'll be back with another awesome recipe soon. I'm going to, we had our brisket recipe up yesterday, so I hope you enjoyed that. What I'm going to do with the leftovers for that is use some of it to turn it into a tasty little ragu. So we'll do that tomorrow. So tune back in tomorrow for that one. And it should be it's actually quite a simple recipe because we've done all the hard work with the brisket before. So yeah, so there we go. Cheers everybody. That's my cheesy beans on toast, and we'll be back very soon. Bye.